My husband and his mistress took my house. One old document turned the tables. My name is Lena Dawson. The day my life broke apart started like any normal Tuesday. I came home from work carrying 2 grocery bags. The sun was low, and our white house at the end of the street looked warm and peaceful. I remember thinking how lucky I was to live there. I had spent years planting flowers in the yard and painting the kitchen walls myself. When I unlocked the front door, I heard a woman laugh. I froze. The sound came from the kitchen. It was soft and relaxed, like someone who felt comfortable inside my home. My heart started beating faster. I walked down the hallway slowly. Every step felt strange, like I had walked into the wrong house. But it was my house. When I reached the kitchen doorway, I stopped. A woman sat at my table. She wore one of my robes. My favorite blue mug rested in her hands as she sipped coffee calmly. She looked up and smiled. Not a shy smile, not a polite smile. A confident one. Before I could speak, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Lena, we need to talk. I turned around slowly. Victor stood there with his arms crossed. And suddenly, I understood something terrible. My life was about to change forever. For 15 years, I believed I knew Victor better than anyone. He was calm, quiet, and always careful with money. He liked plans and order. I used to think that was a good thing. Now I saw it differently. Planning meant he had time to prepare. Who is she? I asked. My voice sounded small, even to me. Victor walked into the kitchen like everything was normal. This is Carla, he said. The woman waved slightly. Nice to finally meet you, she said. The words felt strange, like I was the visitor. And why is she here? I asked. Victor sighed, like he was tired of explaining something simple. She's going to live here, he said. The room felt like it tilted. What do you mean live here? I asked. Carla leaned back in her chair, still holding my mug. Victor pulled a thick envelope from the counter and slid it toward me. Divorce papers, he said. My fingers trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were pages filled with legal words. Then I saw the line that made my stomach drop. The house belonged to Victor. Only Victor. That's impossible, I whispered. Victor shook his head. It's already done. Carla took another sip of coffee. You should probably start packing, she said calmly. I stood in the kitchen staring at the papers. My eyes moved over the words again and again, hoping I misunderstood something. But the meaning stayed the same. Victor owned the house. How? I asked quietly. This house was in both our names. Victor reached into another folder and pulled out a document. He placed it on the table. Remember refinancing the house 5 years ago? He asked. I nodded slowly. He had told me the bank needed updated paperwork. You signed the transfer then, he said. I looked down at the page. There it was. My signature. I remembered the moment clearly now. Victor had handed me a stack of forms and pointed to the lines I needed to sign. I trusted him. I never read every word. You tricked me, I said. Victor shrugged. You signed it. Carla stood up and walked to the sink like she belonged there. You really should pack, she repeated. Victor checked his watch. I'll give you 1 hour, he said. 1 hour. 15 years of marriage and memories reduced to 60 minutes. I turned and walked upstairs without another word. Packing felt unreal. I moved around the bedroom slowly, placing clothes into a suitcase. Every item carried a memory. The green sweater Victor bought me years ago. The photo from our first trip together. The small jewelry box on the dresser. Downstairs, I could hear Carla opening cabinets. Dishes clinked softly as she explored my kitchen. My kitchen! Their voices drifted up the stairs. They were talking and laughing like everything was normal. That sound hurt more than anything else. When the suitcase was full, I sat on the edge of the bed. The room looked different now. Empty. Unfamiliar. My eyes moved toward the old wooden chest in the corner. It had been there for years. Inside were old house papers, tax records, and random documents from when we first bought the place. I almost ignored it, but something told me to open it. Dust rose as I lifted the lid. Folders and envelopes filled the chest. Without thinking too much, I grabbed several stacks and placed them into my suitcase. If I was leaving, I would take my records with me. From downstairs, Victor's voice called out, "Time's up." I closed the suitcase slowly. Then I walked out of the room that used to be mine. I stood outside on the sidewalk with my suitcase. Victor followed me to the door. The evening air felt cool, but my face burned with shame. "Keys," he said. I placed the house key in his hand. For a moment, we looked at each other. 15 years together. And now we were strangers. Victor closed the door behind me. The sound of the lock clicking echoed in my chest. Carla appeared beside him through the window. She waved lightly like I was leaving a party. I turned away quickly and walked to my car. Before I started the engine, music began playing inside the house. They were celebrating. I drove away without looking back. That night, I moved into a tiny apartment a friend helped me find. The room had thin walls and one small window facing a brick building. I placed my suitcase on the floor and sat beside it. The silence felt heavy. Victor had planned everything perfectly. The divorce, the house transfer, even the moment he threw me out. But deep inside me, one thought kept repeating. If he planned everything, maybe he missed something. The first week after leaving the house felt like walking through thick fog. I woke up in the small apartment every morning and needed a few seconds to remember where I was. The place was quiet and empty. The walls were plain, and the single window looked at nothing but another building. I tried to keep living normally. I went to work. I bought simple groceries. I smiled at people who had no idea my life had just fallen apart. At night, the silence felt heavier. One evening, I finally opened the suitcase I brought from the house. Papers spilled across the floor of my tiny living room. Old folders, envelopes, and records from years ago. I started sorting them slowly. Tax forms, insurance papers, old receipts. Most of them meant nothing now. Hours passed while I sat on the floor reading page after page. My eyes grew tired, and I almost gave up. Then a thin envelope slid out from the bottom of the stack. The paper inside looked older than the rest. The edges had turned slightly yellow. At the top of the page were bold words I didn't remember seeing before. Original property agreement. I leaned closer. Something about the document made my heart beat faster. The document came from the year we bought the house. Back then, Victor and I were newly married. We had saved money for years to afford that place. I remembered how proud we felt when we signed the final papers. But I didn't remember this document. The agreement was only a few pages long. It looked simple compared to the thick contracts we signed later. Still, one section caught my attention. A line had been underlined with faint blue ink, like someone wanted it noticed. I leaned closer and read it carefully. The words felt strange at first. Then my heart began to pound. The clause explained that the property had been transferred from the previous owner under one special condition. If the marriage between the listed partners ended because of betrayal by one partner, full ownership of the property would return to the partner who stayed faithful. I blinked and read the line again. Betrayal. Victor had cheated. He had brought Carla into the house while we were still married. The thought made my chest tighten. If this clause was still valid, it could change everything. But I needed to know one thing. Did the law still recognize it? The next morning, I searched for a lawyer. Not the one who handled the divorce. I didn't trust anyone connected to Victor's plans. Instead, I found a small office across town. The lawyer was a quiet man named Adrian Cole. His office shelves were filled with thick books and old files. I handed him the document. "I found this in old house papers," I said. He adjusted his glasses and began reading carefully. Minutes passed in silence. My hands twisted together while I waited. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "Where exactly did you find this?" he asked. "In a storage chest from years ago," I said. He nodded slowly. "This clause is real." My heart jumped. "But does it still matter?" I asked. He tapped the paper thoughtfully. "It might matter a lot." He explained that original property agreements sometimes remain legally active if later documents never removed them. If Victor transferred the house into his name but ignored this clause, it could still control ownership. I swallowed hard. There's proof of betrayal, I said quietly. Messages, photos, neighbors who saw Carla visiting often. Adrian's expression grew serious. If we prove that, he said, the house could legally return to you. The next few weeks became a quiet mission. Adrian told me not to rush anything. If Victor realized what we were doing too soon, he might try to hide evidence. So I stayed silent. During the day, I worked as usual. At night, I searched for proof. Victor had forgotten to remove my access to a shared online account we once used for bills. Inside it were old message backups. One evening, I opened a folder and froze. There were conversations between Victor and Carla. Some were months old. They joked about meeting at the house while I was working late. They talked about their future there. One message made my stomach twist. Victor wrote, "Soon the house will finally be ours." Ours. I saved every message. Neighbors also helped. The older couple next door remembered seeing Carla visit often while I was at work. They agreed to speak if needed. Each piece of proof made the case stronger. One afternoon, I drove past the house. Carla's car sat in the driveway. Through the window, I saw her moving furniture in the living room. She looked comfortable, like she had always belonged there. But soon, the truth would knock on that door. 3 weeks later, Adrian called me. "I think we're ready," he said. My heart raced as I drove to his office. Stacks of papers covered his desk. "Everything is organized," he explained. "The clause, the messages, the witness statements. It's strong." He filed a legal claim that afternoon. Victor received the notice 2 days later. I know because my phone rang that night. His name flashed on the screen. I hesitated before answering. "What is this nonsense?" he snapped immediately. His voice sounded angry and confused. "It's not nonsense," I said calmly. "You lost the house," he replied. "The court already settled everything." "Maybe not," I said. He laughed loudly. "You think some old paper will change anything?" I didn't answer. The silence seemed to make him more upset. "You're wasting your time," he said sharply. Then he hung up. But something about that call told me something important. Victor was no longer confident. And for the first time since I left the house, I felt hope. The court date arrived faster than I expected. That morning, my hands trembled as I stood outside the courthouse. The tall gray building looked cold and serious. People walked past me carrying folders and papers, each one dealing with their own problems. Adrian stood beside me calmly. "You're ready," he said. I nodded, even though my stomach felt tight. Inside the courtroom, I saw Victor sitting with Carla and his lawyer. Victor wore a dark suit and looked confident, like he already knew the ending. When he noticed me, he smirked. Carla leaned close to him and whispered something. They both smiled. For a moment, doubt crept into my mind. Maybe Victor was right. Maybe the old document meant nothing. The judge entered, and everyone stood. The room became silent. Victor's lawyer spoke first. He explained that Victor legally owned the house because I signed the property transfer years ago. His voice sounded smooth and confident. Then Adrian stood up. He placed the old yellow document on the table. "There is an original agreement connected to the property," he said. The judge leaned forward. Victor's smile slowly faded. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Adrian explained the clause clearly. He spoke slowly so the judge could understand every detail. "The property was transferred under a special condition," he said. "If the marriage ended because of betrayal by one partner, ownership would return to the partner who remained faithful." The courtroom stayed very quiet. Victor's lawyer quickly stood up. "That clause is outdated," he argued. "Later documents replaced it." Adrian shook his head. "None of the later documents removed the clause," he said. He handed copies of every contract to the judge. The judge began reading carefully, page after page, date after date. Victor shifted in his chair. Carla looked less confident now. Then Adrian presented the proof. printed messages between Victor and Carla, photos, witness statements from neighbors. The evidence showed the same truth again and again. Victor had been seeing Carla long before the divorce started. The judge looked up. "Were these messages verified?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Adrian replied. Victor's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand. The room fell silent again. Victor stared at the table. For the first time, I saw worry on his face. The hearing continued for almost 2 hours. Victor's lawyer tried every argument he could think of. He said the messages could be misunderstood. He said the clause might not apply anymore. But each time, Adrian calmly showed another piece of proof. The judge listened carefully to both sides. Finally, he asked one important question. Did the relationship between Mr. Hale and Miss Carla begin before the divorce filing? Victor's lawyer hesitated. That pause felt long. Adrian placed the printed messages on the table. Dates clearly showed the truth. The relationship had started months before the divorce papers were filed. Carla stared down at her hands. Victor's face turned stiff. The judge closed the folder slowly. "I will review all documents carefully," he said. The room felt heavy with tension. "This court will announce a final decision next week." Next week, 7 more days of waiting. Victor stood up quickly after the hearing ended. He walked past me without speaking, but his confident smile was gone. Now he understood something. The house might not belong to him anymore. That week felt longer than any week in my life. Every morning, I woke up thinking about the house. Every night, I wondered what the judge would decide. Adrian remained calm. "The evidence is strong," he told me. Still, waiting was hard. 3 days before the final hearing, Victor called me. I almost didn't answer. When I did, his voice sounded different, less confident. "We should talk," he said. "About what?" I asked. "We can settle this privately," he said quickly. That surprised me. "What kind of settlement?" I asked. "I'll give you money," he said. "A fair amount. Just drop the case." I understood immediately. Victor was scared. If he believed he would win, he would never offer money. "I'm not interested," I said calmly. He grew angry. "You're making a mistake," he snapped. "No," I replied. "You already made one." I ended the call. For the first time since I left the house, I slept peacefully that night. The truth was getting closer. The final hearing arrived on a bright morning. The courtroom felt even quieter than before. Victor sat stiffly beside Carla. Neither of them looked relaxed now. The judge entered and opened the case file. My heart pounded so loudly, I thought everyone could hear it. He reviewed the documents again. The original agreement, the betrayal clause, the messages and witness statements. Then he looked up. "The original property agreement clearly includes a betrayal clause," he said. Victor's lawyer stood quickly, but the judge raised his hand again. "Evidence presented shows the relationship began before the divorce filing." The room was completely silent. Victor stared at the judge with wide eyes. Carla gripped her purse tightly. The judge continued speaking. "Because the clause was never removed from later documents, it remains legally active." My breath caught. Then the judge delivered the decision. Ownership of the property returns to Lena. For a moment, no one moved. The words echoed in my mind. The house was mine again. For a few seconds after the judge spoke, the courtroom stayed completely silent. Then Victor suddenly stood up. "This is ridiculous," he said loudly. The judge looked at him calmly. "The ruling stands," he replied. Victor's lawyer tried to whisper to him, but Victor shook his head angrily. Carla looked shocked, like the floor had moved under her feet. Adrian placed a gentle hand on my arm. "It's over," he said quietly. Those words felt unreal. "Over." Victor walked toward me as we left the courtroom. His face was red with anger. "You planned this," he said. I shook my head. "No," I answered. "You did." He stared at me for a moment, like he wanted to argue more. But Carla pulled his arm. "Let's go," she said nervously. They walked away together, but their steps were not confident anymore. Outside the courthouse, Adrian explained the next step. Victor would have 30 days to leave the house. 30 days. I thought about the 1 hour Victor gave me when he forced me out. Life had a strange sense of balance sometimes. This time, the law was on my side. And soon, the house would be mine again. The next month moved slowly. Victor still lived in the house during those 30 days, but things were not peaceful there anymore. I heard updates from neighbors. They said shouting often came from inside the house at night. Arguments between Victor and Carla. Doors slamming. One afternoon, the neighbor who lived across the street called me. "You might want to know something," she said gently. "What happened?" I asked. "Carla moved out yesterday." That surprised me. Apparently, their perfect plan was already falling apart. Without the house staying in Victor's name, things were different. 2 weeks later, another neighbor told me Victor was packing boxes. The house that once felt like his victory was now only a reminder of his mistake. I didn't drive past during that month. I wanted my return to be quiet and clean. No anger, no drama, just the truth finally settling where it belonged. On the final day, Adrian called me. "He turned in the keys this morning," he said. I stood very still after hearing that. The house was empty again. And waiting. I waited one more day before going back. That morning, I drove slowly down the familiar street. My hands rested tightly on the steering wheel. The house appeared at the end of the road, just like always. White walls, blue shutters, the same small garden in front, but it felt different now. I parked in the driveway and stepped out of the car. For a moment, I simply stood there. The front door looked exactly the same as the day I left, except this time, I held the key. I unlocked the door slowly. The lock clicked open. When I stepped inside, the house felt quiet and empty. Victor had taken most of his things. Carla's decorations were gone too, but the walls and floors remained the same. My home. I walked through each room slowly. The kitchen, the living room, the hallway. Memories returned with every step. When I reached the bedroom upstairs, sunlight streamed through the window. Fresh air filled the room when I opened it. For the first time in months, I felt something peaceful settle inside me. I had come home. The house needed work. Victor had not taken care of things before leaving. The garden was messy, and the living room felt dull and empty. But none of that bothered me. Cleaning the house felt like rebuilding my life piece by piece. I started with the kitchen. I washed the counters, cleaned the cabinets, and opened every window to let fresh air inside. Neighbors began stopping by once they saw me working in the yard. Most of them already knew the story. The older couple next door smiled warmly. "We always hoped you'd come back," the woman said. Her words made me laugh softly, because the truth was, I didn't believe it at first either. I pulled the plastic decorations Carla had placed in the garden out of the soil. Then I planted fresh flowers, white and blue ones, just like the ones that grew there years ago. Slowly, the house began to feel alive again. Every small change reminded me of something important. Victor thought he had taken everything from me. But he forgot one thing. Truth has a quiet strength, and sometimes it waits patiently before it shows itself. A week after I returned, my phone rang again. Victor's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. His voice sounded tired. "You got what you wanted," he said. "I got what was mine," I replied calmly. There was silence on the line. Then he sighed. "I didn't think you would fight back," he admitted. That sentence told me everything. He believed I would accept losing the house. He believed I would disappear quietly. "You planned everything," I said, "except the truth." Victor didn't respond. After a moment, the call ended. I set the phone down and looked around the living room. Sunlight filled the space through the windows. The house felt peaceful again. Victor once believed he had won. But in the end, the smallest detail changed everything. A single forgotten document hidden inside an old wooden chest. And that one piece of paper turned his perfect plan into his biggest mistake. Life slowly became calm again. The house felt different now. Not because the walls had changed, but because I had changed. Each morning I woke up and walked through the quiet rooms with a strange feeling of peace. The pain from the past months was fading. I painted the living room a soft, warm color. The old paint had faded over the years, and the fresh coat made the whole room brighter. Friends started visiting again. One evening, my friend Nora came over for dinner. We sat at the kitchen table where so much had happened. "This place feels like you again," she said while looking around. Her words made me smile. For weeks, the house had felt like a battlefield filled with memories of betrayal. Now, it felt like home again. Later that night, I stepped onto the front porch and looked at the quiet street. The sky was dark, and the neighborhood lights glowed softly. I thought about the moment I walked out of this house with a suitcase. Back then, I felt small and powerless. But now I understood something important. Strength doesn't always appear loudly. Sometimes it grows quietly while you wait for the truth to rise. And when it does, it can change everything. A few weeks later, I visited Adrian's office again. This time, the meeting was simple. The legal case was fully closed, and all documents were finalized. The house was officially mine without any conditions. Adrian handed me a folder containing copies of the important papers. "The case is finished," he said with a small smile. I flipped through the pages until I reached the one that started everything. The old property agreement. The paper still looked yellow and fragile, but its words had carried incredible power. "It's amazing that something this small changed so much," I said. Adrian nodded. "Sometimes small details protect people in ways we never expect," he replied. Before leaving, I thanked him sincerely. Without his careful work, that forgotten clause might never have been noticed. When I stepped outside the office, the afternoon sun felt warm on my face. For the first time in months, the future looked open and peaceful. The fight was over. The truth had done its work. That summer felt brighter than the ones before. The garden grew beautifully again. The flowers I planted began spreading across the yard, filling the air with soft color and life. Every weekend I worked outside, trimming plants and fixing small things around the house. Neighbors often stopped to talk. One afternoon, the older couple next door watched me plant new flowers. "You've brought the place back to life," the man said. His wife nodded. "It always belonged to you," she added. Hearing those words made me pause for a moment. For a long time, I thought the house was simply a building. But now I understood it was something deeper. It held years of work, love, and memories. Victor had tried to take it like it was just another object. But homes carry stories, and those stories cannot be erased by a signature or a lie. As the sun set that evening, I watered the garden and looked at the house proudly. It stood strong and peaceful. Just like it had before, everything went wrong. Only now, I appreciated it more than ever. Sometimes people ask if I feel angry when I think about Victor and Carla. The truth is, I don't. At first, the betrayal felt like a deep wound. I couldn't understand how someone I trusted for so many years could plan something so cruel. But time has a way of changing how we see things. Victor believed he had created the perfect plan. He arranged the divorce. He prepared the paperwork. He even planned the moment he forced me out. Yet, he overlooked one simple thing: truth. He never expected that an old document hidden in a dusty chest would destroy everything he built. That mistake changed the ending of his story, and it gave me the chance to rebuild mine. I no longer focus on the betrayal. Instead, I focus on what I learned: patience, strength, and the quiet power of standing up when someone tries to push you down. Those lessons are worth more than anything Victor ever tried to take from me. Today, the house stands exactly where it always did: white walls shining under the sunlight, blue shutters framing the windows, a garden full of flowers moving gently in the breeze. People walking down the street sometimes slow down to admire it. To them, it looks like any other peaceful home. They don't know the story behind it. They don't know how close I came to losing everything. Sometimes I sit on the porch in the evening and think about that day when I opened the front door and saw Carla sitting at my table. At that moment, it felt like my entire life had been stolen. But life has a strange way of protecting the truth. A forgotten wooden chest. A yellow piece of paper. One simple clause written years ago. That tiny detail turned Victor's perfect plan upside down. My husband once believed he had taken my house forever. In the end, he only helped prove something important. The house was never truly his. And the truth was always waiting for the right moment to bring it back to me.